This is To The Point, a Rhino experience. Voted one of the top home services marketing and operations podcasts. Cutting through the bullshit and getting to the point.
Hey, what's up? It's your boy, Cristiano, the host of To The Point Home Services Podcast. Your favorite podcast, I think. I'm pretty sure. If you're listening, it's got to be one of your favorites. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep listening. If it's your first time listening, what's up? How you doing? We're excited to have you on here. I have my guest in studio. That is not really a word, but maybe we can make it one. Hashtag Scudio. In studio, right in front of me. And I've gotten to know him over the past few, months, maybe this year. I don't even remember. But I have Ryan Kettering in here, who is the owner of Prolific Brand Design. What's up, my man? Welcome to the Point Podcast. Are you excited to be here?
I am pumped. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. We got to speak together at in Nashville. It's probably been like a month or 2 months ago over at Jimmy Hiller's shop for the Elevate Mastermind they had at Hiller, which, by the way, is an amazing if you could even call it a shop. It's not really a shop. It's like this massive compound. It's fantastic. If you've never been, you got to go check it out. But I got to watch you present there, and it's just neat to see how our paths have crossed because of the work that you're doing and our customers at Rhino, and just watching it. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I know you were at Tommy Mello's Vertical Track event. Was that earlier this year? Or
that was last year. He has another one coming up.
Yeah, he's got another one coming up soon. Well, yeah. I guess by the time you hear this, it will actually be almost like the next day, I think, or 2 days later. So are you going to that this year? No?
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll
cool.
Be there.
Good. So this guy's like, listen, I mean, you've been around for a minute, but this is kind of up and coming because I've in the brand game, it's no question, like Dan Antonelli and Kick Charge are like, I mean, they're almost like the GOAT in this industry too. And he's kind of been creating some of these amazing brands. A lot of them are my customers. And so when I saw some of your brands pop up, I was like, oh, that's Kick Charge stuff. Nope. It was Prolific. I'm like, but who? And then I'm like, this is fantastic. Holy shit, this is really good. And so now that we've got to work on a few projects together, like I had to have you on here because it's just nice to have another option because Dan gets so damn busy. He gets so far out that there has to be another option because, for me who owns a digital marketing company, if I'm waiting on somebody's brand to be complete, I can't even start the build of their website to run their digital marketing campaign until the brand's done. And I can't be waiting 6, 7, 8, 9 months to get that stuff done. So it was a breath of fresh air to have run into you. And then I talked to Ken Goodrich about you a little bit, and he was like, yeah, man, like this is legit. And so here we are. We've had a few runs together. You worked on Cozy Home for us. You worked on Dream Team with us too. Heather Hitchcock, Royal Roofing. I mean, she's super excited. I think you had your call with her yesterday. Yep. I'm excited to have you here, man, and kind of bring a new perspective to it, giving our listeners something else, another option, another alternative. If you are ever thinking about, hey, man, like brand matters that much that you should be taking your brand seriously. And if you don't have a good story behind it, or you feel like you got a good brand to your last name heating and air conditioning, your last name plumbing, or whatever it is, you got to take this into consideration. So I'm going to get right into it, man. I think that I normally would like lead off this, how you got in the trades. You actually were in the service business, which I learned along the way, and then kind of worked your way into brand. So just maybe tell the listeners kind of how you got into the branding world and then the company as it sits today, because you're based right here in Arizona, just like me. Which is another great coincidence. I'm like, hell yeah. So I can have you come in here and work with our design team, but go ahead and give listeners just a brief, because you were in that service business, and then how you segued into branding, and then like where Prolific sits today.
Yeah. So I ran a carpet cleaning business for 10 years, and it was really my first go at business right out of high school. I finished high school in 3 years, 17, started my first business, got a Yellow Pages ad, I was ready to roll, gotten a few books. I was rocking and rolling, but, I learned a lot about what not to do, what to do.
When was that, by the way?
Man, that was in 2005 to 2015.
Okay, cool.
And then transitioned straight from this company started in 2015. And I always had a thing for graphics, but, growing up, I didn't know how to make money out of art, and I'm like, so I knew how to clean carpets though. So
you did carpet cleaning for a decade?
I started as my very first job at 13 years old. I had to get paychecks on the table till I was 14. You can't get legally paid until you're 14. I also worked at the YMCA at 13 years old. They held my paychecks for about 6 months. I probably shouldn't say that. Should I say that?
Nobody knows where.
I think it's past the 7-year mark, so we're okay legally, I think. But yeah, so I know how to do this thing, so I did it, and I just banged my head against a wall for several years as I tried to understand, all right, well, how do I drive sales? And no, it's not the sales books because I don't have leads. And then after I got leads, I'm like, all right, well, things are starting to go well after a while. But it's like everybody's in the same space, saying the same things, looking the same, acting the same, walking the same, everything.
Yep.
How do I know who to choose as the right service provider, as a client, as a customer? And that's where I started to really see an opportunity in the branding space. So.
Got it. And the carpet cleaning, there's a ton of, I'm gonna use air quotes, carpet cleaners, because it's not incredibly difficult to start.
Yeah, low
carpet
barrier.
business. Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like you're in this trying to figure out, hey man, how can I start to bring in more business? And it was like you realize, hey, you're pretty good at this graphics and branding and illustrations or whatever. I'm not sure if you're doing illustration, but like that's kind of your wheelhouse. So you're like kind of trial and error. You're figuring your own shit out to find like, hey, maybe this is actually where my passion is. Yeah.
And for a couple of years, I was basically just helping because I started, this is where, back in the 4-room days, and there was no Facebook yet, but just, networking with other business owners, and it'd be like just helping people out with different things. And eventually you kind of realize you have something that's worth pursuing. And so I worked for some time to get to the point where I could transition into this. And as soon as I did that, I left Illinois. I left that alone, and moved into this, and new place, new business, and all of that.
And so when was that? When did you leave? So you were in Chicago-ish area or what? Okay. Yeah. So then you got the hell out of there. You didn't even got to tell us why. I understand why. Hey, listen, ain't nobody want to be there right now.
Yeah.
And shout out to my TR Miller guys in Chicago. I'll see you guys in a few weeks. I didn't mean you, by the way. I know it's great at TR Miller. But you left there and came out here to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And so when was that?
So I've actually only been here for almost 3 years.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of a transition. I would have liked to move sooner, but we were getting family stuff in order and all of that. But yeah, it was kind of a signal though for like a transition for me, because, just to step into this kind of new chapter for me with my wife, and, really taking this business to a new level, and just getting like a new scenery around me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And out of the snow. So
yeah, shout out to Kathy.
Yeah. Thank you.
So this is actually kind of cool, because if you think about it, when you're talking about doing either a rebrand or a refresh of your brand, you're also trying to create this like new thing to get excited about too, and to build a story around. Well, that's kind of what you did coming here, right? You came from Chicago to the Valley of the Sun, and it's a new beginning for you, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a whole new thing. So it's cool to kind of have that. Like perfect thing is like I like waking up in the morning because it's a brand new day to do a lot of cool shit. Mm-hmm. And so I just always have loved like getting up early, knowing like, man, I got like this whole runway in front of me of a day to do some great things. What am I going to do with it today? I don't want to waste it. Yeah. It's just a visual thing, man, but you came here. And so now you've been in Phoenix, you've been out here for 3 years. Life is certainly better for you in Phoenix, Arizona. Now what? So like, where is Prolific today? Like, I mean, how many of these brands have you done? I've seen so many of them. If you go to the website, which is prolificbranddesign.com, is that what it is?
Yep.
Prolificbranddesign.com. You can check it out. Prolific. If you don't know how to spell it, Prolific. But you can go there and check it out. But how many of these things have you done? Like, what's the company look like today? Because as you know, like with, Dan and KickCharge, finding good people to create these brands and the truck wraps and things like that is not easy. I mean, that's how, I tried to hire that position and just to bring in Rhino for like a solid 9 months and with zero luck. Mm-hmm. So it's not easy to find that. But like, where does the business sit today? How many of these brands have you done? Like give the listeners just a little bit of info on like where things are today.
Yeah. So yeah. And we, I think the reason why we've kind of just come in contact with each other recently is we've served different spaces in this kind of home service world. Yeah. So we've done a lot of exterior cleaning, and then we do a lot of like the garage floor concrete, and then over the past 3 to 5 years, we've done more and more electrical, HVAC, plumbing, things like this. But yeah, we've done probably, I'd say, over 2,000 by this point. We've been doing this for quite a long time, 7 years now. A lot of it was in smaller spaces at the beginning, like I said, I started in kind of like the cleaning world,
Right.
And then moving into more of the professional trades from there. And in this space, we've probably done it. I'd probably say at least maybe 200 now.
Wow.
So yeah, and we in 2015 it was just me. Now we have a total of 8 full-time employees. 3 brand designers and some other people that help make sure things go the way they should.
That was nice.
Okay, project man. I could go through the whole list, right? But
No, right.
it's not as.
I got you.
But yeah, so things are going well, and we're working with really cool companies. What's really nice is today at being able to offer a higher level service, we're really helping to do more than just visuals. In the beginning, it really felt like we were doing graphic design, visual work, and there's nothing wrong with that in of itself. But I find that it's kind of like if you're a HVAC company, the technical work is part of it, but understanding how to move the needle for someone at a higher level is really what kind of I like more. And so now that we're able to work with higher level companies, really helping them to understand how to identify with their market more and to do things that are truly meaningful and lasting in their business with the visuals, but also within the organization, really at every piece of it. So.
Yeah, man. One thing that I really liked about yours was kind of your process and how deep it kind of goes, and that it can go. Like some people don't want to go that deep in that initial conversation. Like it's not for everybody. Like listen, a lot of our listeners aren't like maybe not touchy feely, like don't want to get into their feelings too much, but it's actually an incredibly important part of creating your brand story. It's like finding something that's real, raw, and that you're passionate about. That is like got some real meaning and purpose to it.
Yeah.
So I liked that I got to sit, thankfully sit on your first call with one of our first customers just to kind of experience the whole thing. And the stuff you pulled out of that guy, holy crap, man. I was like, and then I heard that Heather was like teary-eyed from your conversation. Like, so you're kind of pulling out some raw things out of people, but that's great because then you start to break down the barriers and peel the onion, do whatever you want, like to get to like people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it type of approach.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan. That's why you're here, right? I'm a fan. That's why we're doing, I've introduced you to some other people that need your help and that you're doing a great job on. Do you have a favorite one you've done so far?
I answer this question every time the same way. The favorite brand I have is the last brand that we did because we leave it all on the court. We leave it all on the table. So, and I truly try my absolute hardest. And I said it to our team too, like this has to be our best work that we've ever done. And we don't measure by what could win an award or what was better than another company out there. Is this the absolute best that we could give this company? And that's really what we try to deliver each time. And that makes each one like really kind of special for me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So visually, like I might like certain colors more than another, or I might, but it's almost like, do I like a particular person better than another? People are different, brands are different. And so we really just try to help each person like kind of bring them out. As much as we can. So
perfect. Yeah. So, and I think it's important that another thing that I think that was super, that was really great business decision for you, was you hyper focus on those brands and the truck wraps and not trying to do all the other things that might bog you down because like you're trying to pour everything you got and just hyper focus on these one things. I'm going to do the rebrands. We'll do the truck wraps. We'll do design, those type of things. But for now, that's the focus. Like you're hyper focused on doing
riches
just that. Riches and niches. Listen, Rhino is a niche digital marketing company, and it does pretty darn good. So, but I think that's really important because then you're only focused on this one thing every single day. Everybody's focused on the same thing. So you don't have to learn all the different things. It's not taking away your bandwidth or focus on something else. So you don't stretch yourself too thin. You're hyper focused. And so I think that's important. Now I want our listeners to pay attention closely because branding and marketing are different. Okay. But I'm not asking you about marketing today. I'm asking you about branding and why this is important. Now I'm going to say this. I believe 100% during COVID from my own experience with my own HVAC, plumbing, electrical, garage door companies that we work with, roofing companies that we work with, that branding, if your branding was not great, if you had minimal brand equity in your market, you might have felt that pain a little bit. So I think it really exposed, hey man, if your brand's not on point, it's now time to start rethinking that, especially with an impending, we'll call it a recession coming up. I don't think it's going to be all that bad as we might think it is, but it's certainly something to be thoughtful of. And if a brand's not on point, you could be losing that game. That is crystal clear. We've heard people say it over and over again. So let our listeners know, like, what is the main goal of branding? Yeah.
There's one goal. Basically we need to become the preferred vendor in the market. That's the main goal above all, is that, like you said, if you have 100 jobs in the market, which I know it's not a real number, but
it's a very real number for Rhino customers.
Well, I mean 100 jobs in the whole market.
I gotcha, yeah.
And all of a sudden that goes down in a recession or not depression. Anyway, take that down to 20. Who gets the jobs? Well, in the beginning, 80% of those jobs were going somewhere. So who gets the remaining jobs? The person who was getting them all in the beginning, right? And so there are no scraps left, right? So the preferred vendor is the only person getting work, like you're saying. And that's what we saw as well. And that's actually the time where we started to get rid of a lot of our like marketing type services and focus really hard on branding, was because we saw that great brands were still here and they were still needing work done.
Yeah.
They were looking at how can we connect better with people? How can we solidify this more? And they were using that time to gain market share. And other people were just falling away because they didn't have money to spend on marketing. They didn't plan ahead on their branding, and it was just too late for them. So we saw a lot of people close up. But yeah, the ultimate thing is how can I become preferred in the market? Because if I can become the preferred vendor in the market, then between option A and B, I'm going to take a little bit more pain on option A if I need to, if that's my preferred option. But also, all things similar, if there is no pain, I'm always going to choose that one, right? And being preferred isn't a coverall, right? We got our little one into a daycare recently, and there was one that was further away. It costs more, and it was way booked out, like maybe 2 months. And we were prepared to handle some of that, but we couldn't deal with the time frame. So we ended up going with another one. Was lower cost. It was way closer to our home. But the big thing was that they could get us in like 2 weeks, and we couldn't wait 2 months. And so we were willing to take pain based off of the perceived brand value, the equity that we had just through the small amount of interactions, but there was a limit to it, right? And so we ended up going somewhere else, right? So there is limits to the preference that we can gain in the market, right? Some people, when they go to a restaurant, if you like Pepsi, you'll never buy Coke or vice versa. And there are people literally will never do that. There's people actually, you can search this online. They won't go to restaurants that have the other thing, right? Like they'll only go to Coca-Cola restaurants. It's crazy. Those are like, the crazy fanatics. But it exists in that way. But the reality is that although that's not necessarily how we think about our service business, like people aren't diehard, they're not going to get the tattoo of my service business on their arm or something like that. Maybe they might, but
yeah, right.
But we don't think of it in that way. But you can still build brand preference, right? And that's done through showing what's unique about us, and then identifying with the market, connecting. It's like a relationship, essentially, on a more wider scale than a one-to-one.
And you consistently have to put it out there over and over and over and over and over again. Like, it's not just, hey, you create this brand and like throw it on the site. And I mean, you have to continue to put it out there to market it at that point in time. But the brand needs to create some sort of an emotion one way or another. I like that you said the preference piece of it. I think that is like what we're trying to do, is to make it unique. The brand story matters because people can connect to stories very easily. So if you're telling the story about the brand, it's easier to connect to it because it can create some sort of emotion. And I'll use Goodrich just because, not that you did his, but obviously Dan did his. But I love that he used the whole story from being a kid holding the flashlight for his dad. You can like picture it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, oh, cool. He's just a kid, holding on to this like company that sold for $500 million. But you're creating some sort of emotion with this brand. But you also, as the owner, like, you need to be proud of that brand too, but so do your employees. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, on kind of how brand can help with recruiting and things like that, because it certainly can be helpful. But I want to go to this branding piece and on during the last few years, I was really able to see how branding impacted our internet marketing campaigns to the positive. Like if you had good brand equity, your conversion rates were significantly higher. Cost per lead was going low. It was like a great time to run a strong digital marketing campaign if you had a solid brand. Almost all of them performed exceptionally well from a marketing standpoint. Operationally, different story, right? Because if recruiting got a little bit tougher, which it's always kind of been tougher, but it was cool to see it unfold. So from your perspective, how does brand impact the return on investment?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think if you break down a little bit about what you're talking about there, people are running ads and some people are doing better than others. The other person could raise their budget and get just as many jobs, but they're just not as efficient. And also, we're not even talking about the quality of the lead and the interactions there. And, that brand equity plays into the experience further than just the actual purchase decision. But so you do need that awareness, right? I always say like great brands will still die in the dark, right? If no one knows about you, it doesn't matter how great your brand is. And similarly, some people might think, well, I've seen poor brands do really well. And this is what we're talking about is that you can offset your brand by paying a lot more money, right? For marketing and awareness. And so when you see these certain companies that people are like, I know this huge company, they're doing amazing, but their brand's horrible. How does that work? Well, if I go to a coffee store every single day and me and you are there, but we don't know each other. And every day you come in there and you work on your laptop, I work on mine. And one day, months later of us seeing each other every single day, you decide, I'm going to leave my laptop here and say, hey, do you mind watching this while I run to the bathroom? I say, sure. And you run off. Now, you may not realize that I'm the biggest thief in town, but you trust me because you've seen me every single day, right?
Yeah, that's good.
So awareness and frequency can offset brand trust, real things. And you can just assume you can trust somebody because you're aware of them and you see them all over. They must be good because I see them everywhere, right? But what if you were to then take that awareness and that repetition and that frequency and then add in a message that actually I connect with and I would prefer and that says something about who I am and says something about you. And it allows me to say, you know what? I would rather do business with them and I see them everywhere, right? So if you can combine those things, it makes a whole lot of sense why people are, doing better with their marketing campaigns because they're getting the awareness and they're getting the connection with the client.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this kind of falls along the lines of like at Rhino X earlier this year, we brought in Mike Tyson. I think you knew that. Yeah. And originally I brought Mike Tyson in for entertainment purposes and the fact that as a kid, like I loved Mike Tyson, baddest man on the planet, and also been on the podcast from our Q&A. But he made one really phenomenal comment that kind of stuck with me the whole way. And it was that consistency kicks determination's ass. Consistency kicks determination's ass. So I like to think like being consistent over and over and over and over and over and over again for the long period of it is what helps. Like we just had on a few weeks ago when you're listening to this podcast, we had on the Wizard of Ads and he talks about the same thing, repetition and consistency, rolling those ads out there. And this guy's arguably the best of the best in this space. He's the one that created that brand story for Gettle, for Morris Jenkins, like on the East Coast. Like, so create the brand. You said like, if it's in the dark, I always used to say, hey, it's a great brand. If you put a billboard in the middle of the ocean, it looks great out there. It looks phenomenal. If nobody's going by, who gives a shit? Like you ain't going to see it anyway. So, but I do know for a fact that when you look at across all Rhino customers, digital marketing campaigns, if you look at conversion rates being super high and cost per lead low, almost always the brand was phenomenal, like 90%. So not even a small number, a big number. So I'm telling you, listeners, brand impacts your business. And if you got to rip the Band-Aid off at some point in time and just get it done. If you care about your business long-term and your employees. Okay. Hear me say that. But you don't also, if you're in a spot where you're like, yeah, but maybe I can get the brand, but I don't have that budget like Ryan's talking about to spend. Listen, that's still not an excuse because social media is still free in a lot of ways. Like create organic content, put posts out there, stories, shorts. I don't TikTok. Okay. I can't get wrapped up in that stuff, but it's like a thing. So there's things that you can do that cost you nothing that you can still put your brand out there over and over and over again too. You have your existing customers that you're going to see that you can continue to tell that story, get your team behind it, all these things. But telling you, brand matters that much, and it's not going to go the opposite way. It's only going to get more important.
Yeah.
So this leads me to kind of my next point. How does somebody know, like if they've got like their current, branding or what they consider branding, if it's just like a logo or whatever it is they got, they got just to get the business rolling, when do they know it's time to do a rebrand or like like with Heather's, from Royal Roofing? I don't think we're like really I mean, I guess I don't know because you're doing it, but point was take what was existing, the little like, I don't remember how much you spent on it, but it was super inexpensive, like little logo creation thing too. Yeah. But we're turning it into like a legit brand, but when does somebody know, like maybe it's time to reconsider and redo this?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is, when you're thinking about it, like when you're aware of it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Like, I mean, when I met my wife, I told her, it is, that's like, when you know, right? The longer answer is, to go back to what you're saying about, the repetition and consistency over, determination, it reminded me of like Gary Vee, was like one of his big things was like, just like you're doing this stuff, just record the process and like get that out there. If you break that, bring that back a little bit, what he's kind of saying is, look, you have a brand. You're not showing anybody though. You're real. You have stuff going on that's interesting, but you're not showing anybody. So everyone has a brand already. Even if you literally don't even have a logo, you still have a brand. Yep. But is it really being represented the way that you want? Right. So a lot of times we're doing all the cool stuff with customers, but we're not showing anybody. I talked to a guy the other day. He's doing two things I've never heard of a company doing before. And I'm finding out he's not telling people about them until he's in the home on a physical in-person estimate. And I'm like, how does that make sense? Because you realize how many more estimates you would get if you were to drip this out sooner, right? But you're waiting till basically they're already sold, otherwise you wouldn't be in their home, to tell them why they should buy from you. So if we were able to drip these things out sooner and tell a more sort of inclusive story, it's kind of like when you watch a movie. If you had to wait until the end to figure out what was going on, you'd have checked out, right? Yep. This is what we're making people do. So I forgot the question.
How do they know when it's the right time to rebrand? So it seems like I don't actually know where that was going, but
so I think the point was, when you think about who you are, do you feel like you're being properly represented in the market? Do you feel like when you look at your visuals, when you think about what's happening in the market, do people know about that sooner? Does you'll see a company that's, they'll come to us and they're $5-10 million, and you look at it and they look like they might have just started yesterday, and it's a $200,000 deal, right? Or maybe even less. So why is that? Well, we just haven't taken the time to do anything with it yet. We haven't put our attention, and we're walking out. I'm going to a formal dressed event looking like, in jeans and a shirt with stains on it, and wondering why I'm not getting the response or why people aren't, looking at me in the way that I want them to. We need to get you sort of dressed for success in your business. And that comes with the visuals that signal a lot, other things, right? They say you don't, you read the book or buy a book for the cover, right? And that's very true. What do? Then you flip it over to the back. You read the back, maybe the info, and so you take these couple steps. We're expecting that people are just going to take this crappy book off the shelf and buy it and you go use it, and that's not going to happen. We need to set ourselves up for success in that way, where every step is signaling to the next. And the easiest way that you can get that consistency, like you're talking about, is with simplicity. What we try to help our customers do is create what's called a fractal brand.
Hang on one second.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on one second.
All right.
I want to go there because the question was, how do I know when to rebrand and refresh or do a refresher? So I think what I hear you saying is, at the end of the day, you have a brand whether you like it or not, and your brand is going to might be how you interact with your customers. It could be with how you interact with your employees, what you're putting out there, your quality of work, like whatever it is, whether you're marketing it or not, you've got a brand. But I think if I heard you correctly, is you kind of get that feeling, like the gut feeling when like, you know what, you might have seen some other brands or trucks or something, because at the ground surface, everybody's doing the exact same thing. So like, if you're doing the exact same thing, what else are you doing to set yourself apart? Well, brand is a good one, to at least a good starting point. So if you know and you feel like, damn, I've seen some of these other things and mine's kind of like, if you kind of got that gut feeling, maybe go ask somebody, like in your own employees, hey, what do you think about like our brand? And if they're not a yes man or a yes woman, like hopefully they'll give you some good, honest feedback. But if it's in your gut and like you think like maybe it's something. Yeah. It's at least something worth chasing down. And maybe you talk to, a Dan or a Ryan or whomever, and you don't do anything, but at least you're taking the step to know like, okay, I think I'm going to trust your gut.
Yeah.
Trust your gut.
And a professional company should have a professional brand.
Yeah.
Right? Successful brands invest in their brands. And also every, 5, 10, 15 years, even if you have a great brand, you should be at least revisiting these main things. Look at Pepsi, did a 90 billion, 90 million or whatever it is. Like they spent a crap ton of money to do a small little update on their logo. It wasn't a small little update of the logo. They're reevaluating their entire brand, and some adjustments were made to the logo, right? So we need to reevaluate our position in the market every 5 to 10 years because things are moving fast. So you see companies actually updating their branding even faster now.
Yeah, and some of them are even going back to like simplifying it.
Yeah.
Like think about this. Look at my hat. What's my hat have on it?
A rhino.
Mm-hmm. Is that my logo?
Yeah.
Part of it. It's actually the internal part of the rhino logo,
the
right?
Portion of it.
So it's just all I did was take it and simplify it. No, I'm not rebranding. So no, but like it's rhino is rhino. But point being is like I just like to have versions of my brand to then share with my employees to be excited about the company and the brand of the business. I can feel good about it.
Yeah.
I want to feel good about my brand. I want my customers to feel good about the brand, and how they feel good about the brand is how we treat them, what the service is, like all these things. So I build it and then I put it out there and I do it consistently. And this is something that I've seen so much. I'm going to kind of roll into my next question because it's around this. And I actually heard this question came up to me during my presentation at the Clover Mastermind a couple weeks ago. And it was, hey, do you think that the illustration, like the mascot type branding is played out, and I actually have heard this a couple different times because we in the social media world and who are also involved in this type of stuff see it more frequently than the consumer, the homeowner. So my answer was this from my perspective. So I'm going to ask you next, but from my perspective is no, it has a ton of runway to it still. But we just see it more because it's almost like when you start to look at new cars and you find the one that you like, all of a sudden you've seen it like 50 times. Like you start to notice that car more. I forget what that's called, but you know what I'm talking about? Yep. So we see these a lot. Like even the listeners, if you're in any of these social media groups like Service Avengers or Service Einsteins or, HVACs or whatever the hell it is, you see these because they're posted frequently. But the homeowner, different deal.
Yep.
They're not looking for these things. So is it played out? Absolutely not. Not even close from my perspective. But what's your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think.
I mean, obviously you create these, so your answer should be no.
Yeah.
But I'm like saying like legit, seriously, because do you get sick of this type of stuff or do you enjoy it? Like tell me a little bit about your opinion on it.
Yeah. So they're definitely not, I would say not only are they not played out, they will never be played out, but keep in mind also that neither will icon style logos or wordmark logos. So it's like saying, will a particular type of food ever be played out? Will hot dogs and pizza ever be played out because people eat them every day?
Coke, right. To your point. Yeah.
But the real question, and I think there's value. I like that people are asking that question, but and here's why: is because I think for a time, people saw this type of thing and said, "Oh, I need that," and that's not necessarily true. It could be the right thing for you, but it might not be the right thing for you. It's all about what's best for your brand. And so by just going out and saying, well, what's going to sell the most? Well, in general, that there's no right answer. But for you, there is a right answer. So I like that people are questioning, what's really right for me, because it may be the illustration logo or maybe not. They're not going out of style. And if it's right for you, that's what you should have. If it's not the best fit for your company, to represent who you are and who you are trying to work with in the market, then you shouldn't go with that. Neither one of us have mascot, fully illustrated type logos. It isn't the best fit for us, right?
But you find that this is where I think I'm glad you said that, because you actually, if you're sitting here saying like, oh, I don't know, like, I don't even know how to get there. But guess what? You're not alone. Like, it's pretty common to feel that way, because you're like, oh, I have no idea. This is why when I sat through your process, like that whole initial call process, you figure it out. You start to find those things that are like, that they don't know to think about. Like me too, by listening to it. So that's how you get there to figure that out, by the way, listeners, is you kind of got to go through that process, get asked all the right questions for you to start to understand, what does this need to be? Does it need to be illustration? Do I like that? If you don't like it, there's other options. Like you mentioned a few other things. So it doesn't have to always be a cartoony mascot type stuff too. There's plenty of brands out there that aren't those things that are incredibly successful. But if you go through the process, you'll be able to figure out which one best fits based on the questions that are asked. Fair?
Yeah.
So, and then from that, I've seen a lot of the branding help with recruiting, which, as most of our listeners know, like, is a bitch to be able to get people on board. And especially, like, it's not getting easier. And it's pretty much been this way in the 15 years I've been in the trades, of working working in the trades. But how is branding helping with like building the right team, recruiting, like that type of stuff?
Yeah. So basically with communication in general, you take any good book, any good movie, it starts from one idea and it breaks down from there. Right. And so, like we were talking about simplicity and how can I, or consistency, how can I be consistent? The easiest way is simplicity. And the easiest way to be simple is to start from one thing and then branch out from there, so that everything is basically inherently cohesive. That's what I call a fractal brand. So basically, the main thing of your brand is your core belief, a singular belief, not 10, but one. And everything stems from that. And then your next is your personality, and then how your kind of your social identity, which is your key aptitudes and what is resonating, so forth.
Hey, can I stop you real quick without you forgetting what you're going to say?
Yeah.
So remember that. Might write it down if you have to. But I was going to say, the way I just viewed what you said was kind of like when we created our core values for this business, because you can pull from that, because that is the purpose behind the business. So number one for me was genuinely care. Everything else, our positivity, our integrity, our transparency, our communication, all those things came from that number one, genuinely care. So when you said it's that one thing, to me, that's what it was. If I genuinely care about my customers and their success, I should genuinely care about my employees and their education and their success, and it all kind of can stem from there. So that was my one thing I could pull from. Now you have to like peel that onion. Yeah. But that's how I took what you just said. So I didn't mean to cut you off. Hopefully you remember where you were going.
Totally good. And just one more little thing on that, kind of a quick tip is your core values essentially just explain how to be a person who cares. So a lot of people, they pick random stuff. These core values don't mean anything because they're just picking them. They're just simply an explanation of how to be a person that is like this. So if I'm a person who cares, truly cares about people, then this is how we act at this company to represent this brand. How does that? Your core values. That's how you act that out. So it's a very simple process. But basically, when you apply that to everything that you do, what can happen is you start to make new decisions, you have new ideas, you start to treat people differently because everything's stemming from this core. And so when somebody comes in I'm going to interview as an employee, a team member, and instead of saying, well, here's what we do here, and what do how did you deal with this situation, and what basically, I can ask some of those same things, but I want to change the conversation. Just the same way with a customer, that they'll only talk about price if we don't give them, we have to give them something else to talk about. With team members, we want to give them something else to talk about. Why don't we talk about who we are and make sure they're a good fit for that, right? So most people aren't talking about this because they haven't articulated it yet. But once you get that down, you can say, hey, listen, this is what we believe, and this is what we do here because this is how we are because of that. And as you walk down that path, you can see how I can see when somebody's checking out, or like when they're actually against a way, or when they correct you on a way. Like, you can't correct who I am, right? We're not a good fit if we need to try to, you know what I mean? So what happens is you can start to bring in people that actually fit with your organization because they're fired up about who you guys are and what you do, not just what you do. On top of that, I had a call with NER the other day, that you had connected me with. And one of the coolest things I saw was that he made this huge push online. They have this kind of like ride along series, and they show the technicians, and it was cool. They saw one guy, he was like, yeah, I'm going to try to, he's the fastest dude in the company. I'm going to try to beat him today. And he's on his walkie, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna get you today. He's like, it's just cause we're on camera, dude. And they're laughing and stuff. But they have like, I don't know how many, it seemed like maybe over 100 of these things. And I immediately, when I saw it, I said, this dude has no problem getting technicians in, because like that whole Gary Vee thing, they have the brand, they have a good culture, they have good stuff going on. But what if nobody saw it, right? What if they didn't tell anybody? And so they're actually building things that allow people the technicians to see who they are and how they treat people and what their values are. And that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned in the hour, like they have phenomenal branding and phenomenal culture for as massive as a company they are. I've been up there to Salt Lake City. I have a great relationship with Mike and Wyatt, Jeremy, and that whole team up there. And they do, man, like everybody's bought in because they are who they say they are, and they do what they say they're going to do. And so it's cool to kind of have like seen that actually play out. I mean, because down here in Phoenix, they just started, Any Hour just started down here in Phoenix. So the branding isn't the same, but everything about that, the folks that are here is the same as the same company out of Utah. Same thing, same, just different location. So I want to segue into something real quick too, just out of the branding piece of it too, because I do think at the same time, just like, consumers see your brand or listen, I'm gonna give a shout out to my boy Tommy Mello. Every morning when I drive into work and I'm on 93.3, I gotta turn it down, because if I hear him talk one more time, like I can't listen. Tommy, I love you, man. You're doing a great job on consistency. Because I hear it all the time. A1 from day one. So props to you, bro. But the whole thing I like about the branding piece is typically when you get it done, we take it and put it into the website number one. Like we have to wait on it to build the site. And that's kind of like phase one is what we see a lot of, like, hey, you get to rebrand and you build a new website. So, but then the next thing is typically the next like engagement or integration is in the truck wraps.
Yeah.
So the wraps, I've seen a lot of like really great, and I pay more attention to them now more than ever. But I've seen a lot of really great and creative wraps, and some of those are super simple. So anytime somebody posts like wraps in these different social media groups, it's like, which one do you like? I'm always like, oh boy, here we go. Or, hey, here's my new wrap. What do you think? I'm always like, oh boy. Like, I'm pretty sure that that's kind of what you're not supposed to do. But
my response is, what do you think about your wrap?
Well, I see so many of them in those groups, and everybody's got their own opinion, right? But ultimately it's like, there's got to be these fundamentals that, that I know Dan knows too, that like that say, hey, regardless of what anybody likes, these are the facts. These are the things that we know that you have to have. Is there like some fundamentals for truck wrap that make them the most effective? Like, is there anything that you're like, hey, don't put a bunch of shit all over this thing because nobody's going to take the time to read it? Like, what are these fundamentals to making a successful truck wrap?
Yeah. Well, the first one is having one, right? Having one on all your vehicles, because you get 50,000 impressions per day. It's literally the lowest cost per impression thing you can do. And you already own the big investment, which is the truck, right? So it's just unleveraging yourself if you don't do it.
How much do those things like typically cost? I know you don't actually do the wrap yourself, but
usually around $5,000 to $6,000 on like a transit type, the normal vans that people have currently today.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's square footage, so lower or higher depending on vehicle.
Sure.
But yeah, so but it's a one-time-ish thing. You gotta rewrap it every 5 years. So it's literally like your fractions of a penny per impression. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And people see it and they think that, well, all of a sudden you have 3 trucks. People think when it's done right, you have 30 on the road. Wow, I see you guys everywhere.
See all over the place,
even with one truck, we've heard of, I see you everywhere. One truck,
That's a really good point. This literally just happened to me. I had a contractor come into this office who lives up where I do, and I've been noticing their trucks more and more, their wraps more and more. And I said, you guys must be blowing up. And they said, we only got one more truck. I was like, what? I see you everywhere. And it's just because there's enough of them, but all driving around the same neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. And we won't go into this further, but that's a great point, that if you can geo niche yourself, then if you can really be felt, like you might not be able to, let's just take like a nationwide company. Can a guy with 5 trucks beat a nationwide company? No. Can you beat them in this neighborhood? Absolutely. How about then add on another one and another one, right? So anyways, so the first thing is having it. The second thing is I want to point out that if I was serving dentists, we would do the logo. We would have someone like you do the website. I might do the sign on top out front of the door, and then probably the interior of their store, right? Because these are the main visual interaction points. So your truck is the main, your logo, your website, and your truck, that's the main visual interaction points you're going to have, right? So these are the things you want to have right. So how do you get them right? Well, with the vehicle, the 3 things I'm trying to accomplish is wow, who, what, 3 W's. Wow, I need your attention. Who are you? So that's the brand first. And it's in that order, right? I need your attention to talk to you. The second thing is, all right, well, who are you? Brand first. And then the category second. All right, what can you do for me as the client? That needs to be presented in a way that's consistent with who you are. And that's in its core what we try to accomplish. If there's a 4th thing, it would be how do I get in contact with you, which is, we contact info on there, right? It's typically I always have that on a vehicle, but it's not as important as the other things, because if I don't have your attention, it doesn't matter who you are. And if I don't know who you are, it doesn't matter what you do. A lot of people get that one wrong, right? Because if you advertise a category, you're actually advertising for all your competitors. If you're advertising category first, and I don't pick up on that who, because if you just say, heating and cooling, come hire us, whoever we are at this phone number, all I'm thinking when I see that impression is, do I need that? Yes or no? And then what am I going to do now? Oh, I'm going to go with the brand I know, right? So it has to be brand first and then category second. And that's why if you look around at, major companies, they're always trying as quickly as they can. You do want that descriptive form, but big, huge companies try to get so big and so known that they can eliminate that other thing. Meaning I don't need to tell you what Apple does anymore, right? But so you want to have that on there, but that's the goal, is to really, you'll see that it's all about figuring out how can we get our brand known for this thing, not the thing known, right?
So actually, I've never heard it put like that. That's pretty cool. So that the wow, who, what, and if you have a 4th, it's the how.
Yeah.
Super cool, super simple. That actually might answer my next question I was going to ask you. By the way, that'd make for a great topic on the podcast. So shout out to my man, Zach, who does all the podcast titles for us. That could probably be a good one. But my next question was going to be like, what's the biggest mistake you're seeing these small businesses make with their branding? And maybe it's just, maybe they're not taking those things, or there's probably got to be more to it too, like maybe oversharing.
Yeah, I can give you the technical side. It's like basically like, so what we'll see is like, that's a simple formula, but still people can mess that up because they'll be like, oh, well, what do we do? Well, here's 13 different things that we do. Let's list them all on the side of the van, and let's put them twice on that side of the van. Like for some reason, it doesn't make any sense, right? But it makes sense to them because they're just thinking through like how I would say the thing. But what they don't step back and say is, we just said the same thing 13 times, right? Because to a consumer, when you say all these different things, you're saying the same thing to them. Except for now, I can't read it.
Yeah, leave that.
I got a paragraph.
Leave that to the SEO.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's the biggest thing that we do wrong in general as business owners. Any business, I think, especially small businesses, is we tend to make a mess, and that's okay though. But that's the biggest thing, is that people make a mess and they leave it. What we need to do is, we're all going to make a mess at times because we're moving, things are happening, like things are going quickly.
Yep.
So sometimes you're going to make a mess. That's okay. Step back and then have those times where you can evaluate, you have accountabilities in check so people can evaluate and say, we did this thing, the vehicle wrap or our website. And now let's step back and say, all right, we've made a cool mess here. Can we clean this up? Does it actually communicate the way we want? What does this look like to say about our team? What does this say to our clients? Who is this going to connect with, right? And we do this stuff, but we don't reevaluate and say, is this where we wanted to end up, So that's the biggest mistake, I think, is that people are making too big of a mess and they're not cleaning it up. And so they're saying a bunch of stuff that no one cares about. and it's taking away. That's why the simple, like you said, like simpler wraps, that's the whole point of it, is that if I add something, it directly takes away from something else. So if I'm going to add something, it really needs to make sense. Right. And that's with any communication.
Yep.
Website. I mean, I'm sure you know about this on the website, right? But it's all that. So for me, it's like reevaluating and saying, what can we get rid of? Could we get rid of something and say the same thing? Because if you can, you've said it better.
Got it. So less is more.
Yeah.
So I actually like that. If you're going to add something else, you're going to take away from something else. But because at the end of the day, what you still have to try and do is make somebody want to look at that. That's the wow. Like, why would they want, like, oh, cool, like the design, like, or the color, or the whatever, the mascot, or the whatever it is that makes you say, yeah, that's cool. Simple. Who are you? What you do. You don't put plumbing, drain cleaning, sewer line, like,
Yeah, it's all plumbing.
Water heaters,
to a consumer,
water softeners, like all these things. So 100%. So simplify it. Now, the big thing is, like, even when somebody's jazzed up, like if you listen to this podcast and they're like, hell yeah, I'm going in, I want to get it done, is if you're anything like me, listeners, I thrive on instant gratification. And I have very low patience, because when I want something done, and here I have control of those things and I can get them done faster. But speed is an absolute necessity. So what's the average time for, like, you, obviously, again, like, can we kind of understand where, the kick charges in such demand too, that the timelines are crazy busy, which is like a beautiful testament to the business that Dan Antonelli runs. For you, what's the average cost on this type of stuff? Because if their listeners might be thinking, oh my gosh, how much does this thing cost? $20,000, $30,000. Like, what's the average cost when you kind of work with Prolific? And then how long does this process typically take? And by the way, I will give you a piece of advice right now. Be very cautious on the timeline piece of it too, because the listeners will hear what you say and they're going to hold you to it, man, if they reach out to you. But what's typically the cost for somebody to do the actual brand and the wrap design? And then how long does it usually take?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that we have really good turnaround times in this space for the type of work that's being done, the complexity of it. Literally hundreds and hundreds of hours go into, a single job, and it's quite staggering to see the back end. But a first proof, we're usually getting to a client in 4 to 6 weeks. Wow. A total project is usually done in somewhere between 8 to 16 weeks, depending on the complexity of that project. And we have,
and does that include you have to wait for feedback from
right? So that's
the client too.
So that 8 to 16 week, we're factoring in for some, like, okay, we're going to wait a few days to hear back and things like that. If somebody has a urgent thing, we see what we can do to accommodate that, right? We have one of your clients that we're going to be, looks like be able to wrap up completely in 6 weeks. That's not normal.
No, but that's fantastic. Thank you.
But we're usually getting the first proof between 4 to 6 weeks. And that's really, it's about having enough time for our team to sit with the challenges and work through them. And, but that's all because, like I said, in 2020, when things started shifting, we made a lot of changes, and we looked at them like, 80% of our work comes from 20% of, right now, 20% of this type of thing, which is the branding. So why are we spending all of our time on this other stuff that makes us no money? So we got rid of all kinds of things. And I'm always waking up with a question like, what could I get rid of today? Because I know that, and the same thing like we talked about with communication and, niching, all this, the less we can do, the better we can do those things. Right. And so we just really try to focus on, it's the brand development, the strategy, creating the visuals foundation for that brand. That's what we really truly love. And that's what we try is hard to stick with that. And so when somebody says, can you do this other thing that you don't normally do? We really try to say no. And that allows us to get to I think, some really good lead times on that.
Perfect,
stuff,
man. So like, what's some good, give a ballpark on cost too? Because again, listeners are going to hear one thing and roll with it. So, but give maybe a ballpark on cost just so they have an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if you looked up the average small business rebranding on Google, you just look at that up, you'll see, price range from anywhere from like 50 to 100,000. These aren't like $100,000 companies that are small businesses. Right. But, that's for a full rebrand, so I think that it's really worth that for sure. But that said, our prices usually range between 10 to 20,000, depending on the package that somebody's going for. And that's including stuff that a lot of times you go with some of those bigger firms that don't serve this space you're not even getting like,
Yeah.
they don't know how to do a truck route.
Yeah, man. And they don't understand the industry. Like you got to also like, there's a psychological aspect to this whole thing too. So
It's a really unique industry because that's why it's like the graphics are so unique, because it's not B2B, like this kind of cold, it's not full on consumer, like Cheerios and Legos. Like, you know what I mean? It's this really, it's a really unique space. And that's why there's not many people serving it. And, you know, we were able to have an opportunity to do that.
yeah, dude, when you told me you added like 3 people and I was like, how the hell did you even find them? Because I was looking for 9 months.
Because I know who we are.
Yeah.
And I know what we are to them.
Yeah. What makes sense. Well, listen, I'm glad that we were able to connect too. And thank you for cranking out some of our people faster. I appreciate that. But again, listeners, now you have pretty much a lot of things.
If you're a client of Chris's, we'll take care of you.
There you go. Sweet. I love it. Well, then if that's the case, then I'll tell you what, why don't we do this impromptu? If our listeners want to take advantage of Prolific services, is there some sort of like offer that you could give to them since they're loyal listeners? Like, is there something like that you can offer? If you can't on the fly, it's okay. But if there's something that you want to roll out and they say, hey, referred by To The Point, you want to give them something? You cool with doing that?
If you, yeah. So how about this? If you contact our team, Travis does our sales, is my brother. He does a great job. He'll take care of you. So
what's his contact info? Or what's the best contact info for them to reach out to?
If you want to just go to our website, Get Prolific, GETprolific.com is the short link. Go to Get Prolific, click the schedule a call button. If you schedule a call and book with us, let them know that you heard the podcast. And if you can give the podcast number, is that a good way to do it?
Well, if they heard you on the podcast, they're going to know since you've only been on the To The Point podcast.
Probably, yeah.
So just say To The Point.
Mention the podcast, and we'll give you, and Travis will set you up with $500 off of any branding
Sweet,
package.
$500. Hell yeah! Thanks, man. Appreciate that. So, listeners, take advantage of it. No, I appreciate that. I put you on the spot, but thanks for coming through. I don't know that you really had another choice, to be quite honest with you. No, that's awesome. I appreciate it, and thanks for sharing the information, man. I'm actually really loving the wow, who, what, and how piece of this that I learned towards the end. And you know, I remember I've gotten to hear you speak and kind of share and see some of your before and afters, and which are super impressive, and like lots of great brands, from your pressure washing guys, your carpet cleaning, to your HVAC, your plumbing, to your roof, like all the things. So super excited to see how Dream Team plays out in Royal Roofing, like all that stuff too. Obviously, I told you I'm going to feature that Royal Roofing brand at the RoofCon event that I'm speaking at, and SRC Summit I'm speaking at, and Win the Storm, like all these roofing conferences. So I'm excited to feature your brand that you create for her, and she seems super excited about it. But listeners, hopefully, if anything you're taking away from this, like you need to at least consider, if you've had that like gut feeling that maybe something needs to change or maybe somebody's stuff looks better, chase this thing down. Listen, what you think you're saving, I promise you're losing in revenue and sales and marketing, things like that. So it's not that big of an expense, right? So reach out to them, Get Prolific, GETPROLIFIC.com. We'll also post it, so you can reach out to him easily. Mention To The Point podcast. He's going to give you $500 off. Hell yeah. So I don't really give discounts at Rhino for things because it's quality. So I would say that's pretty cool of you, man. Because
we've never
need to do that. So I kind of put you out there, and I apologize.
So
for
just
that.
to be clear, we have never given a discounted offer.
Did you just do that because I put you on the spot on the air?
I did it because you guys have awesome people that you connected me with, and I want to work with more of those brands.
Well, you have to let me know when people reach out to you. So listeners, please take advantage of it. Nothing else, at least have a call with them and kind of go through the path and like see if it's something that you need to do. Nothing wrong with that, right? I think it'd be time well spent. But Ryan, I appreciate you coming on here, man. I'm grateful for the work that you've done on my customers specifically. I'm grateful for your time today, you coming over. It's always cool when I get to have somebody here, and since you're here locally, worked out perfectly. Yeah. Listeners, I think that that if you just go to that website and look at the different designs that these guys have done, you'll see what all the fuss is about. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big deal. So congratulations on building a great business. Congratulations on just the success that you're having and the work that you're putting out. It's phenomenal. I know you're not trying to build award-winning work like for the sake of winning awards, but that's exactly what you're doing. So, and I'm excited to be a partner with it. So listeners, take advantage. But man, I appreciate you being on.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay. I'm going to finish with a review. Are you ready for this? Yeah, ready? Okay. I read this review, and honestly, it actually made me well up a little bit. So I'm going to read it to the listeners. This is 5 stars from HVAC_N_NYC 93. So my assumption is you either started your business in 93 or you were born in 93. Either way, I appreciate the 5 stars, my weekly education. I have literally used TTP, to the point, as my weekly education to get better at running my company. I've grown 2 million this year from things that I've learned from this pod. Thanks to my boy, in quotes, thanks to my boy, Chris, for everything and all the amazing guests. HVAC and NYC 93, please reach out to me and let me know who you are, because that is freaking awesome. So thank you so much. Awesome. I'm glad you're implementing it, because that's a big deal. You hear the things, you got to do the things. You don't have to do everything, but you got to do something. No 0 days. Listeners, thank you so much again for listening to this podcast week after week. We are extremely grateful. Again, the whole purpose of this podcast is to give back to the home services industry that we love so much, whether you're a Rhino or not. We really, really appreciate all the subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please go in and subscribe, and you'll get all the episodes sent to you automatically weekly. Also, we have really enjoyed your feedback. It's so meaningful for us when we get to read the nice comments that you guys put. So keep doing that. And if you don't know how to do it, here's what you got to do. You search for To The Point Home Services on Apple Podcasts. You click on our profile, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and hit write a review. And be honest and share your story and how the podcast has impacted you and your business. Thanks again from the bottom of our hearts at To The Point Home Services Podcast. We appreciate you.